Okay, Dr. Campbell, can you spell your name for the record, first and last
Yes.
name?
First name is Vera, Vera. Last name Campbell, Campbell.
And can you state your position and title?
Yes, I am the Assistant Dean for Assessment within the School of Pharmacy. I'm also an Assistant Professor in the Department of Pharmaceutical Sciences, and I have a background in drug abuse research.
It's good to have you, Dr. Campbell. Okay, my first question. Heroin was first synthesized in 1874. Now, that's a long time ago, but Bayer Pharmaceuticals, a large pharmaceutical company, was the first to market it under the trademark heroin as a cough suppressant and as a non-addictive morphine substitute. What was the state of the pharmaceutical industry in those times? And fast forward to today, what major regulations and advancement have taken place to avoid that sort of misclassification?
And what you have to realize is back in the 1800s, we were just kind of switching from the time when you had apothecaries, or what was known as pharmacies back then, that were still using remedies as opposed to what we have now, which we're more technologically advanced. You have companies that are able to do research and actually do studies that will test for the abuse liability of drugs that, which they know in structure are similar to like an opiate. They will actually do tests to determine whether or not there is abuse liability for those drugs. Whereas in the 1800s, it was just starting to, get into that research technology age. And so basically the patient was the research subject. And so while they knew that there were people that took drugs that were similar to opium that were addicted, they really didn't understand the abuse liability until you were actually treating a patient and that patient was craving and seeking the drug.
Speaking of risk liability, we know heroin can be sniffed, smoked, or injected. Which form possesses the most, or the greatest rather, risk of lethal overdose?
It's the intravenous method of injection. And the reason being is that when it's in the blood, it quickly goes to the brain and it can work on the receptors that are in the brain that would cause respiratory depression. Whereas when someone is sniffing it, it actually has to be absorbed in the nasal mucosa, then get into the blood and produce an effect. So rapid onset of effect via the IV use. And it's also the route of administration that most people, if you are IV using it, you will get the feeling of the flush and high more quickly. And that's why people will abuse IV more so than they would if they were taking it orally or
Intake by heroin users?
mostly IV, because if you're thinking about cost, you're going to use, you don't need as much to get the high if you use it intravenously versus if someone were to sniff it, you're going to need a greater dose to get the same quote unquote high feeling.
And a follow-up to that question do heroin users more so stick to the same method over their lifetime of using heroin?
Yes. Basically most heroin users are going to use the method or that is going to get them the fastest high and is going to keep them high the longest, and that would be the intravenous method.
Okay. Are there any numbers to show for heroin users?
In the past, it was typically used by inner city men. But now you kind of have seen a switch to Caucasian female, and I believe that it kind of goes right along with who's using prescription drugs. And if you aren't able to get prescription drugs,